This lesson is the first part of a two-part series on communication within climate negotiation. In this lesson, I talk about developing your core message. That is, what are you going to say? In the next lesson, I talk about open listening, which is, what does the other guy have to say? In developing your core message, the key point that I'd like to carry throughout the entire lesson is you can't negotiate when you don't actually understand your own position. The objectives are to understand why we need a core message in the first place, understand the do's and don'ts of preparing that core message, and then finally understand that everyone's core message is actually different. In climate negotiation, we're dealing with a crowded field. And as we discussed earlier in the course, there are many players, and they all have unique perspectives, and they don't necessarily agree with you. So a large part of what I've been saying so far is that you have to understand what they're trying to tell you, understand their views. But first, we have to understand our own message. And then ultimately, we have to learn how to package that message to encourage understanding. Well, I did a bit of research on this, and I discovered that we can learn from marketers on how to package our messaging. This is something that I've been carrying now for about 30 to 40 years in my professional practice. That is, selling difficult ideas to folks who may not be receptive of them, and what techniques do we use to communicate those messages to people who may or may not be interested in what you're trying to tell them. So we can learn from the marketing community because, they're always selling. And they're selling things that we may not want initially. So they've learned over years and years and years of selling us stuff, how to package and deliver a core message, and then win us over with it. Think about it, going into a car dealership or the first time you saw an iPhone or a smartphone. What was your reaction? I know the first time I saw a BlackBerry, I was not impressed. I don't need that. I'll never need anything like that. And yet today, I live on my iPhone. So at some point, somebody at Apple convinced me that I could use an iPhone, that it would benefit my life, and that I should try it out. And that's a hard message to sell, because in selling these sorts of products to people, you're asking them to part with a significant chunk of cash. So the message has to be clear, and it has to make the value of doing that absolutely apparent to the buyer. And climate negotiation is much like marketing, except in my view, the outcome is much more important. Because what we're trying to do ultimately is convince people that taking action on climate is necessary. And to do that, we need to understand our message. Otherwise, if you don't really know what your message is, you're going to find in discussion, in negotiation, that you can blow around in the breeze like a flag. So whatever direction it's coming from, that's the direction you're going. And as a result, you can find yourself drawn down dead ends, diverted from your theme. What are you trying to say? You don't really know, so you're going to get diverted from it pretty easily. Or, and this I see a lot in climate negotiation, drawn into other discussions that have nothing really to do with our core message. Discussions about my character, my motives, my credibility. And because of that, we lose track of the mission. And ultimately, this descends into conflict. So what do we need to do? Well, I believe that there are 5 simple steps. Number 1, focus on people. Number 2, tell a story. Number 3, highlight benefits and results. Number 4, keep it simple. And number 5, and probably the most important of all, believe in your message. So it has to be your message, and you have to believe that what you're saying is true. So the first one, focusing on people. this is an emotional discussion. I mean, remember that folks are worried. They're worried about their jobs, their family, and their security. And so this is an area where we can, through our messaging, share our common worries. What do we have in common in all this? And ultimately, develop an understanding that with respect to this climate negotiation, we are actually all in this together. Tell a story. So how does this all play out? Draw a picture for people. Doing something will make it a better world, and how will it be better? This is important because it cannot be abstract. It has to be concrete, real. It has to resonate as being believable, true. There's no blaming here and no shaming, and we have to keep it positive. So we want to tell a story that says climate action will benefit folks. We believe that climate action will benefit folks. They are not the bad guys here. We're all in this together. And we need to highlight the benefits and the results. So stay focused on the positive. We need to, of course, acknowledge that there are obstacles, but we can't dwell on all that negative stuff. When you do, people will get turned off and then they will walk away from the negotiation. So when we present the obstacles, we need to present them in a way that shows that, yeah, while there are obstacles, they can be overcome. Here's how we can overcome that. But finally, people just want to know what to do. So our core message has to tell them. Take all the mystery out of it and focus on the hows. And we need to keep it really simple. And this is over the years of my career being called the elevator pitch. And my key for this particular message is it should be under 30 seconds, the length of an elevator ride, less than 5 bullets, less than 5 words per bullet. And in your negotiation, in your discussions around climate, when you're in doubt, return to the elevator pitch. So I actually like to call this broken record. It's a part of negotiation. And that is, I repeat the message I want people to hear over and over and over again. Not necessarily in the same words, but certainly repeat it so that people will understand exactly what I'm trying to say. Now here's an example of one that I've used a number of times. This is something from the work that Jonah and I do. But I would say, for example, climate change is real. We all have a stake in this mess. And we believe that many small actions are better than a couple of huge ones. But in all of that, we have time to take action. We have time, and it doesn't have to hurt. So there's an example of a core message, not necessarily your core message, but it is an example of one that you could deliver very quickly when someone asks you, what are you up to? And finally, like I said, very important, believe your message. You gotta believe. Folks recognize BS when they hear it, and they will reject everything in the message if they catch even one little bit of a hint of a lie in your messaging. So it has to be true, and you have to be sincere about it. Now that I'm talking about not false sincerity, really sincere. You have to believe it. If like I said, people will recognize BS when they see it, and false sincerity is a turnoff. It can destroy your entire message. And if you find that you don't believe it's your message, go back and start over. You can't turn something you don't believe into something you do believe. Work it so that you are talking about something you believe in. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit here about what not to do. A couple things here. First, don't use your mission statement. I'll come back to that. Don't rely on facts and figures. Don't offer detailed descriptions. And ultimately, don't list your own virtues. So why shouldn't you use your mission statement? I mean, your organization's put a lot of effort into it, and why wouldn't you use that as your core message in climate negotiation? Well, 3 reasons that I can see. The first one is mission statements tend to be based a lot in your own corporate jargon, your own company's way of saying things. They love jargon. And actually, most folks outside of your organization don't get it, don't understand it. It just goes right by them. I think second and more important is that mission statements focus inward. They're really talking about what do we want to do for our company with our efforts. But a core message should be focused outward. Basically, if you follow my advice or if we negotiate to some concrete climate action, what's in it for you? And oftentimes people fail in their core messaging because of this simple little dichotomy. They do their core messaging in a way that says, it's really important to me and it's really important to my organization. And the average person outside of your organization, they say, I just don't care. But if you show them why it's important to them, they do care. And as I said, don't rely on facts and figures. This is something I've been talking about for many years in terms of the difference between information versus data. We really don't want to share data. What we want to do is give people information. So we need to take the data, digest it, synthesize it, put it into a context, put it into a form that people can understand. That's what we're trying to share in our core message. So we need to provide information. And remember, facts never speak for themselves. So we have to show what it means and provide the context for it so people get it. If we throw a lot of numbers and data, facts, and figures at people, they just shut down. I've seen this so often in university lectures where you look around at a classroom when a professor is going on and on and on, throwing up all sorts of equations and data and numbers and figures, and half the class is asleep. Or, these days, playing on their iPhones. And finally, don't try to impress people. But this is a negotiation, and we really need to understand it's not, well, I'm so great that's important. What's important is the mission and why other people should do something. We're asking them to take an action. So it's they're the key, they're the focus, not me. And I would say don't get too detailed. Keep it really simple. Provide a summary. Practice open listening. We'll come to that in our next lesson in a bit more detail. And we may need to fill in the gaps as we go along. So as we're providing our core message, someone may ask you something to say, well, geez, I never thought of that. So we need to fill those gaps as we go along. But ultimately, then this is a hard lesson for most technical people, but we need to be comfortable with letting people asking us for more if they want. So give them enough to understand, but not everything. And if they want more, people will ask for it. But you need to understand where the gaps may be in your messaging, where those questions may come from. So anticipate those questions and be prepared with good answers. Don't list your virtues. This is something I've seen a lot in core messaging. Don't tell people why they should listen to you because of all the good things you've done. You're actually offering them a challenge. So you're trying to win over hearts and minds. And this is not the time to sell other folks on why you're qualified to say this, your superior morality, and just how smart you actually are. That comes across as being very negative, and people won't listen. Finally, this is your core message, and it may be different than mine. Make sure it says what you want it to say. Not necessarily something from somebody you admire, something you think you ought to say, something you read in a book, or something you saw on social media that you thought was clever. So oftentimes we'll find our core messaging is corrupted by just including other people's messaging in what we have to say without a lot of detailed thinking. We have to really think about what we're trying to say and does this fit and does it help with that messaging? For example, I actually admire Greta Thunberg. But my core message is different than hers. I've had different experience. I have different training, different skills. And I see climate change through different lenses. These are the lenses based on my experience. And we need to understand that we're all going to see these things through our own lens. So you will see it through your lens. And ultimately, that means that you're going to have to develop your own core message. I think this is really important. This is something that we don't often do, but I really think it's critical that you write it down. And that can take iterations. Write it, test it, then rewrite it. Testing it, try it out on a friend, a colleague, family, say, what are you getting from this? And if they're not understanding, it's often easy to get cranky when you try out your core message and your partner, your spouse doesn't get it because you think, they're just not ready for this. But the fact is, it's your job to communicate to them. So you need to rewrite it so they get it. And it will evolve over time as we gain new information and insights. In any given discussion, know what you mean to say it, actively listen, and then we learn and evolve. So in this lesson, I covered why we need a core message, the do's and don'ts of preparing that core message, and the concept that everyone's core message is different. Feel free to comment below. I'll review those comments and we'll share them with everybody else in the course. In the next lesson, I will be talking about open listening. So this is the other side of this core messaging, and that is understanding what other folks have to say.